not brother, so you may have noticed that I am not particularly J-shaped. J is just a bit busy being so instead you get me, a fun substitute brother. I'm Sabrina and I love history, and today I am going to use it to prove that Snow White is the queen of Disney princesses. So here's some cool history. Now, the story of Snow White was around long before Walt Disney was even alive. Tale number 53 in the first edition of the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, Snow White was originally called Sneewittchen. Sneewittchen? Snapewitchen? I don't know. But it was only about a century later when Walt Disney first experienced the story, when he was just 15, working as a newsboy in Kansas City. It was February 1917, and a film adaptation of a popular play was being specially screened for the newsies, Snow White. The hall was filled with eager kids watching as the projection played on all four walls, and a young Walt Disney sat watching, taking in two slightly out-of-sync screens at once, the story being burned in his mind. Fast forward to 1934, Walt Disney Productions and the man himself were already making waves in animation with a few Oscar nominations under his belt. But that story, that film, Snow White, remained in his mind, playing over and over, until one evening, he knew it was time. Walt gathered his crew and acted out the entire movie concept that had been brewing in his brain, using voices for each character, the animator becoming animated. And thus began production for his first feature-length film, and in fact the first cel-animated feature film in the history of ever, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yes, dwarfs, not dwarves. Blame Tolkien for popularizing a different plural. Speaking of the dwarfs, there were about 50 of them at the start, like lazy and wheezy and tubby and maybe just more words to describe me. But they eventually got narrowed down to the 7 we know and love today: Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey, who wasn't supposed to be named Dopey because it's a sort of weird adjective. But Disney was like, it's fine, Shakespeare said Dopey. Shakespeare never said Dopey. And maybe it's because Disney pulled stunts like that, or maybe because it was such a groundbreaking film, but it was really expensive to make. Animators would work for months on a project only to realize it didn't fit in the story. Songs were recorded but never heard in the final cut. Snow White was supposed to cost $250,000. Its final cost was about $1.5 million. That is 6 times the budget. All the while, Walt's brother Roy and his wife Lillian tried to talk him out of it. It was bankrupting the company. Walt even had to mortgage his house to help finance the production. But December 21st, 1937 was the moment of truth. 3 years after performing his one-man show, Walt Disney premiered Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at the Carthy Circle Theater to an audience filled with hopefuls and haters. And Judy Garland. The audience watched as 2 million illustrations flashed before their eyes, frame by frame. The queen questioning the magic mirror, the young princess fleeing through a terrifying forest, the dwarfs playing and dancing, and the prince breaking the curse. And as the audience cheered in a standing ovation, it became abundantly clear that the pains of production were all worthwhile. 6 days later, Walt Disney and his 7 Dwarfs appeared on the cover of Time magazine. In fact, adjusting for inflation, the film has now grossed over $1.8 billion, blowing Frozen out of the water by a couple of $100 million. That's right, move out of the way, Elsa, the real queen's in town. The film was nominated for Best Score at the 10th Academy Awards, where it was the first film to ever release a soundtrack recording. Interestingly, the only one to ever feature the voice of Adriana Caselotti, who Disney requested never sing in a movie again so that her voice would only ever be Snow White's. But the thing is, it didn't even win. Despite the fact that the film was universally recognized as freaking amazing, it didn't take home a single Oscar that year. It was only the next year when the Academy got its act together and awarded Walt Disney an honorary Oscar. And now this wasn't just a normal award. Instead, Disney's Oscar was the usual one, with 7 little ones by its side. Like the Dwarfs! So if you think about it, it's kinda like he won 8 Oscars. Actually, he doesn't even need any more. With 59 nominations and 26 wins, Walt Disney holds the record for the most nominations and the most wins for any individual. And listen, the weirdest thing is, a bunch of them are for Best Documentary. I don't get it either. But yeah, that's the story of the princess who laid the groundwork not only for Disney's royal kingdom, but for animated films in general. The princess who couldn't be stopped by bad budgeting or expectations. The princess who made more money than anyone before or after her. That is the story of Snow White. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like learning some cool history, I've got a whole series of it on my channel, Nerdy and Quirky. I cover everything from the stories behind famous paintings to the real cause of the Salem witch trials. But anyway, please remember to like this video if you haven't already, and be sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on those Carlin brothers being super. But that's all I've got for you today, so I guess I'll see you in another life, brother. Thanks for having me.